On Monday, Lebanon's government stepped down less than a week after a massive explosion in Beirut. It killed 220 people, it injured 7,000, and sparked days of violent protests. What's the future of Lebanon now? And what will the role of the church be? Joining us to discuss this and more is national security and foreign policy expert Dr. Walid Phares. Walid, thank you for being here. Following the explosion of 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate in Beirut's port on August 4th, thousands of Lebanese gathered in downtown Beirut to protest against the government. Now, they hold the government responsible for the catastrophe. Lebanon's prime minister and his cabinet resigned in reaction to the protest. What's the political reality on the ground in Lebanon today?
I'm glad you asked me, Raymond, about the reality, because that's very different from what we read and or see in the media. Reality is, from the beginning, from ground zero, where the explosion took place, is that the port of Beirut, the airport of Beirut, the city of Beirut, and many provinces are controlled by Hezbollah, which is an Iranian-backed militia, and of course the other jihadists. Now, when the explosion took place, it took with it, and that's the drama, 1/3 of the city. I mean, the half of the city is Christian, the other half is Muslim. 1/3 of the Christian side, but of course many Muslim neighborhoods were also destroyed, is gone. People now are kind of refugees, they need support. But the problem, the real problem, since you asked the question, is they cannot do reform. We cannot advise them on reform before dismantling and disarming the militias once and for all.
Now, you mentioned Hezbollah. Hezbollah is a Shiite political party, a militant group that has had much support from Iran. How much power do they have within the political structure of Lebanon at this point?
Raymond, at this point in time, after 30 years, after the invasion of the last free enclave of Lebanon, 1990, they do control power. Basically, they have a sway over the army, the various ministries, the police, the security. So you're going to imagine that you have a Pasdaran or a SS force in the background, and then they control everything else. And that's what the real problem of Lebanon is. The U.S., the Trump administration, put them under heavy sanctions. But sanctions, economic sanctions, need a longer time to be able to be efficient.
Yeah. On Sunday, 36 country representatives came together in a virtual donor conference. They pledged around 250 million euros in financial aid to Lebanon. They made it clear that the aid would be contingent on reforms. What impact can the international community have at this moment in time on reforms in Lebanon? And is that practical? Is that doable?
That's an excellent question, Raymond. It can do a lot. If it wants to do a lot, it will have to have a U.S. leadership. Even the French, and I spoke with some of the advisors of the president, agree that the French have done a lot. Lebanon was under French mandate in the past. Germany, Italy, Great Britain, even some Arab countries who are our allies can do. But without the United States, it's going to be very difficult. And Raymond, you're the one who knows that. We are busy in our domestic situation and the riots and all the matters that have been developing till November. So any solution to Lebanon will have to wait till November. But we can do a lot, meanwhile, which is to channel some of the aid. I would not recommend to do a massive aid campaign before having reforms. And the top of the reform is to disarm the militias.
On Wednesday, Joe Biden, and you talked about domestic concerns, Joe Biden announced Kamala Harris as his running mate. Now, when it comes to foreign policy, Walid, in the Middle East particularly, she essentially opposes all the current administration has been doing. She said she would rejoin the Iran nuclear deal. What do you make of Biden's choice and Kamala Harris, at least in part, running our national security policy, should they be victorious in November?
Look, if you run on national security policy and you're going in the wrong direction, that is a real problem. Yes, immediately my reaction was that the single most important achievement by this administration and the single most problem created by the previous administration was to sign a nuclear deal with the regime of Iran without even Iran guaranteeing that they're going to stop terrorism or developing missiles. I mean, the story is known by now. So to have the first point by the candidate, the vice president candidate, to say we're going to go back to the Iran deal is a problem in my view.
There have been protests, as you mentioned, and riots in American cities for months now. In Portland, Oregon, there's been an ongoing nearly 80 days of protests, and they've moved from downtown to residential areas. Now, efforts to defund police departments have already taken place in 12 U.S. cities. Do you consider this a national security issue?
Absolutely. Defunding the police, meaning eliminating the police. Eliminating the police, meaning the country will be like in Mad Max country, which means that you don't have a police. So what happens usually? The weakest will be hit hard. Downtowns will be left for gangs and armed, people. But more importantly, citizens will be without protection. So what would citizens without protection do? They would have to protect themselves. Is this the America we are looking forward to have without police? I don't think so.
Walid, it's clear Joe Biden is trying to make this election about what he calls restoring the soul of America, a focus on COVID and racial divisions, racial disharmonies, and that he would be the agent to rectify that. Trump is going all in on law and order, and I'm going to revive the economy. Which vision at this point do you think America will be embracing as we move into the election season?
Look, America is a nation like other nations. It's very special, of course, because it's a nation that achieved, very amazing projects for the last many, many years. But let's be very pragmatic in the analysis. There is a core of people who are going to be voting for Biden and the Democratic Party. They're not going to change their opinion. There is another core, significant, which will vote for the president. The battlefield is going to be the center. We have about 10 to 12 million people from the silent majority who can vote and will vote in that center. The priority, as a political scientist, I'm telling you this as somebody who had observed two past, presidential election campaigns. Number one is safety. What's happening in the cities is the most important but silent reason for how these voters are going to vote. Second, of course, the management of getting out of COVID into society. And thirdly, to have a check in their pockets as they are moving into the fall. So if you combine those three, the center most likely wants to see a more stable, safe America, and they are dreaming of going back to a strong economy. So the answer is there.
Very good. Dr. Walid Phares, thank you for your insights, and your columns and media appearances can be found on Twitter at Walid Phares. Thank you, Walid.
Thank you so much.